Hello and welcome to the third episode in the Beginner's Guide to Imperator Rome. In the first episode we learned about the various pop types, trade and buildings. In the second we learned about technology and inventions, and now with the third in the overview portion of this series we're going to be taking a look at culture. As with everything else in Imperator Rome, systems are heavily interlinked with each other, with nothing standing apart from the other systems. Some, however, are less linked than others, and it stands to reason that if that is true, then the inverse also is. Culture is, in my opinion at least, the most heavily interlinked system in the game, with effects that touch almost every part of your playthrough, be it from the composition of your armies, the happiness of your population, or the loyalty of your characters. Culture affects all of these, so let's take a look at it. Jumping back in as Rome, we can open the culture map mode with this drama mask icon above your minimap. If you do not have the culture map mode on there, you can add it by opening the configure map mode screen with this cog icon, then dragging the culture icon onto any of the slots above your map. The culture map shows you the dominant culture of every territory on the map, and hovering over Rome it would indeed look like Roman is the dominant culture here. If we click on any of the territories that are majority Roman, we can see the full extent of where our culture is, with the game highlighting territories where even a single Roman pop is present, regardless of whose country they are in or whether or not they are the majority. For example, in the settlement of Luceria in Apulia, Messapian is the dominant culture, but there's also a sizable Roman population here, and we can see that when we select Roman on the map. Other cultures are even more widespread, such as the Etruscans to the north, who have Etrusci pops as far north as Brixia, and we can even have a sizable amount of Etruscans in our own country. Also, if we plan over to Macedon in northern Greece and select the Macedonian culture, we can see that due to the conquests of Alexander the Great, there are Macedonians spread far and wide from Macedon itself to Egypt to the Indus River in northwestern India. You may have noticed that alongside Roman, there are also other cultures that share our shade of red, like the aforementioned Etruscans, but also Sabellians, Umbrians, and more. This is because we all share a culture group, in this case, Italic culture, and these pops would be happier in our nation than a Greek pop like Macedonian would. We can also open up the culture screen on the toolbar to the left of your screen, which will give you detailed information about the cultures of the various pops in your country. Hovering over the pop types at the top of the screen, you can see the cultures broken down by pop type. Further down the screen, we can see every culture that currently resides in our country. This can be sorted in a number of different ways, such as how happy the culture is, how many pops of that culture you have, or which culture group they belong to. Hovering over the happiness percentage of the Hebrew culture, we can see that they have a base happiness of only 12%, whereas with the Etruscans the base happiness is 20% because they share our culture group. This affects all pops of these cultures within your nation, and will determine how productive they are, and in extreme circumstances whether you will suffer a rebellion from the unhappiness. Along with the base for unintegrated Italic culture, we can see the Etruscans have the right of intermarriage, giving them a further 6% happiness. This is one of the decisions that you can enact to make your foreign cultures a bit more happy within your nation. With the Etruscans, we can elect to found a colony in a territory where they are the majority, in this case Nepete, which makes it slightly easier to assimilate them to being Roman, and increases the migration attraction of the territory. This means that we're more likely to see Romans from other territories moving to Nepete to potentially make it majority Roman. This option does make it a bit slower to eventually integrate the Etruscans, and makes them quite a little bit less happy too. There are quite a few happiness inventions that you can find in the civic, oratory, and religious trees too. Just use the search bar that we spoke about in the previous video to find all the happiness related inventions. Added together, they can make your nation massively more stable. You will discover that your main culture and your integrated cultures have separate cultural decisions associated with them, ranging from the granting of privileges for noble elites of your main culture to the honorary patronage of an integrated culture or designation to administration of other kin cultures within their culture group. One thing you'll notice here is the cultural integration speed, and this determines how fast you can make a culture an integral part of your nation, removing the penalty for being an unintegrated culture and giving them a base cultural happiness that your primary cultures enjoy. You can see this primary culture happiness at the top of the screen. Now you may think, oh, so it's a good idea to just integrate all cultures and that will make them all happy. But alas, no. For every culture you integrate, the primary culture happiness drops by 4%, so it really is a balancing act, as you will never be able to integrate everyone, but certain larger cultures may definitely be worth it, especially if you're looking for the specific cultural inventions that we spoke about in the past video. Going too hard on cultural promotions can see your unintegrated pops actually have a higher happiness than your primary culture. I guess everyone of this time period didn't really like sharing their privileges with others. So, say you want to integrate the Lepontic culture for that Noric steel. How does one go about doing that? Well, you see, unintegrated pops are limited to being at most freemen. They will never promote to citizens or nobles. To integrate them, you click on these arrows and select the citizen or noble option. Both will class them as integrated, but be aware that while integrating to citizen status will drop your primary culture happiness by only 4%, promoting to noble status will drop it by a further 5%. As your new culture is promoting, which will go faster based on the decisions you've chosen and the amount of pops you have of that culture, you will have a malus to your stability growth, and there'll be certain events happening during the promotion period. Such events can lower primary culture happiness for a time while giving a big boost to integration, and happiness buff for the lucky culture being promoted. But definitely take care to read the event, because some can even move your capital. You'll have to decide which of these options is optimal when they appear. Personally, I like to get this integration period over and done with as quickly as possible, so that's the option I most often choose. Not only does every single pop in the game have its own culture, but also every single character too. Of course, we haven't gone on to talk about characters, and we don't have time for them in this video, but just briefly, every character has a loyalty stat, which determines how loyal they are to the state, to you. If the character is of your primary or one of your integrated cultures, you'll not have much problem at all. But if the character is a member of an unintegrated culture, there may be a hit to their loyalty based on how happy the integrated culture is. For example, we switch over to the Antigonid Kingdom here, where Phoenixid has a negative 1.8 malus to his loyalty from character culture happiness. As we can see, he's a member of the Troan culture, which is a sister culture to our own Macedonian and from the Aeolian coast. Looking at the Troans in our culture tab, we can see their happiness is 24%. If we give the Troans the right of inheritance, then the culture happiness boosts to 30% and our Phoenixid no longer has any penalty to his loyalty. These are just some of the ways you can keep characters in line in your campaigns. Another thing that culture affects, I did tell you it touches a lot of things, didn't I, is the makeup of your armies. Sticking with the Macedonian cultured Antigonid Kingdom for a moment, we can hover over Macedonia and see that our culture allows us to raise a very specific kind of levy, one made up of heavy cavalry, heavy infantry, and light infantry. Every culture has its own levy makeup, such as the Romans getting light cavalry, heavy infantry, and light infantry, or the Maharashtran Indians getting war elephants and archers. When you raise your levies, the makeup of that army is based upon the integrated cultures you have in a specific region. So, for example, as the Antigonids, if I want to raise a levy in Syria, it'll pull troops from all the Macedonians and Aramaics that live there, as I have both of these cultures accepted. It will not, however, raise troops in the Phoenician pops that live in Syria, as I don't accept either of these cultures. What this means is that more accepted culture pops you have, the larger your armies will be. One can do this in a few different ways. The first would be to go and accept the cultures of your empire, which we've already spoken about. But the other is to assimilate those cultures into being your primary culture, in this case Macedonian. This will happen slowly over time, but can be sped up through the Cultural Assimilation Governor policy and via a few buildings. First is the Marketplace, which increases the assimilation speed by 2.5%, which is nice when your base assimilation speed is high, but on its own is not super useful. To complement it, we can construct the Grand Theatre, which you need to unlock first in the left-hand tree of the Oratory Inventions. These are limited to 1 per city and increase the base assimilation speed by 2. The settlements are not left in the dark here either, as they can construct the Provincial Legation Building, which increases the assimilation speed by 15%. And finally, going back to a previous video again, there is the Cultural Assimilation Keystone invention in the Civic Path, giving you a nice 10% boost to assimilation speed, along with a 25% boost to integration speed. I hope you've gotten an idea of just how integral culture is in Imperator Rome, and how there are incredibly few systems within the game that it does not affect in some way. Learning how to navigate the cultural makeup of the game is incredibly rewarding, and can allow you to punch far above your weight when it comes to warfare. That is, unfortunately, all we have time for today though. Next time we'll be looking at the sister to culture, the other side of the coin if you will, when we take a look at religion in Imperator Rome. But until then, salve.